Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. My name is Becca Shapiro. I'm part of the training team at CLASS. My background is in K-12 education, so I'm excited to help you guys figure out how you're going to work this into your virtual programming.
And I'm Caitlin Bergendahl. I am the manager of training services here at CLASS, and Becca and I and Liz work together really closely every day. I'm delighted to be able to work with such brilliant and hardworking people. My background is in higher ed. I've been an instructional technologist, instructional designer, and faculty developer. I worked in the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, and I'm really interested today in helping you all understand how CLASS can fit into your teaching environment and how it can be more of an in-classroom-like experience for your online classes. So I'm going to kick us off, and then Becca will take over. Becca's new on our team, and she's getting up and running, and she's just awesome. I'm so excited to have her on the team. And so let's talk a little bit about what I know about Fort Smith. So it sounds like you've got Schoology. Is that right? Okay, lots of nods. Schoology. You've got about 160 students who are virtual for that virtual academy. Is that not right? Is it more than that?
Oh, now it is.
Okay.
It's more than it's about 330 now. And we do have Schoology as a district, but we use Pearson Connexus for the virtual students.
Okay, great. So we'll talk about how to integrate Connexus and Schoology, and we'll also talk about the difference between sharing files and sharing your screen. And this is my virtual teachers group, right? Everybody here is teaching fully online. So excited about this. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started. Feel free to unmute, ask questions. This is your session, so I want it to be useful for you. Also, if you'd rather post in the chat, feel free to do that. We've got some folks here who can monitor chat. And Liz, if you don't want to stay, if you need to hop off, that's cool too. I'm recording this session, so I'll send this to you when this is all done. Does that sound like a plan?
I gotta hop off about halfway through, but I'm gonna stick it out as long as I can.
Okay, cool. We're happy to have you as long as you want to stay. So if anybody else has any other obligations and wants to watch this recording, I'm going to keep you all on another screen so I can see your reactions and gauge some thumbs up and head nods and that sort of thing. So if you see me looking off in the distance, I'm actually looking at you. Great. So everybody should be able to see my class application here. Yeah. Does everybody who here has class downloaded already? Okay. A number of you. That's awesome. So have you played around? Have any of my folks played around with the application yet? Have you launched demo class? Yeah, Rebecca's saying yes. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. Great. Has anybody already scheduled any courses? No? Okay. So let's start there. So tell me really quickly before we start, with your students, your online students, how do you currently invite them to a Zoom session? Do you send them a link? Yeah. Okay, great.
There's a link that's permanently embedded in their class on the landing page.
Okay, great. I'll show you how to create a course and then how to get that link and replace your Zoom link with a class link. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, awesome. Okay, so first, let's go. When you log in as an instructor, you should see these two buttons, create a new class and start office hours, right? If you don't see those two buttons, it will say you're logged in as a student. Yeah, Carrie, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. When I push download, it downloads and I try to open it and it says download Insight requires attention.
Let's hold off on that and let's come back to that. And you probably need to get in touch with Samantha, and Samantha can file a support ticket for you with our folks.
Okay.
But we can get you some help for that. Absolutely. So yeah, if anybody here has trouble downloading, let's address that. Yeah, absolutely. We'll file a ticket and we'll get you some help. So I'm going to show you how to create a new class. So I'm going to click this orange button right here to create a new class. And you have a lot of options on this page. You can choose your title. So if you want to be teacher, instructor, or professor, you could also click other and put in a different title. I will note, though, that if you invite anyone else as an instructor to your course, they will also have that title. So if you put Mrs. and then you invite Jonathan to your class, he's going to be Mrs. Mathis. So just pointing that out. I know Jonathan wouldn't like that. He said, don't do it. So I'm going to stay as instructor. I'll call my class, let's call it Fort Smith. Oops, it helps if I could spell Fort Smith 101. You could enter an optional topic if you like. Your school name here, mine says Class EDU because that's where I work, but yours will say Fort Smith. And then if you have any description that you want to add, again, that's optional. So next you can select days of the week. Does everyone here have their class running Monday through Friday? No? Okay, so we have a mix. We have some people who run specific days and some people who run every day, maybe K through 3 or something. Okay, so just pick what days of the week you want your class to run. I'm going to say mine runs Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I'm going to start my class. Let's say we start it at 12 o'clock. Oops. And it runs until 4 o'clock. So you just put in your start and end times. Okay, and then down here, it selects automatically 1 day from today. But if you look and click on the start date, I can't click a later start date right now. I've put in a ticket for this to get this changed so that a calendar will just pop up and you can select any day you want. But for right now, I'm going to start with my end date. So I'm going to have this class run through the end of the semester. I'm going to say we're going to go on winter break after the 17th. So I'll have my class run through December 17th, and we're going to start on let's actually start on the 23rd. Okay, so we're starting from August 23rd to December 17th. If I had a lab or a session that ran on a different day, I could click this add more dates button and I could pick a Tuesday at a different time, like 2:55 to 3:55. And what that does is that adds that extra date to my calendar. So I'll show you. Do you see this one extra day, this extra Tuesday where I'm running from 2:55 to 3:55? Yeah. I'm going to remove that. We're not actually meeting on that Tuesday. And then I'm going to remove it from my calendar here as well. So I'm just going to click that red X. And another day we're not meeting is Labor Day, right? We're not going to have class on Labor Day. So I'm going to click Labor Day. I'm going to click the red X and remove Labor Day from my schedule. So now we're going from Friday to Wednesday. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. Next, you'll set up a class passcode. It automatically generates it, and you don't actually need this, but if you have littles and you wanted to set an easy passcode, you could put in your last name. You can make this any 10 characters you want. So I could call this Fort Smith right here if I wanted to. And do you all use waiting rooms? Yeah, so you can turn your waiting room on. And then you could say students also can't join before the instructor. I usually turn my waiting room off, but say that students can't join before me so that I'm there, I'm expecting them. So that way students aren't in my classroom when I'm not there. Did I have a question about that? No, okay. Does anyone here co-teach a class or fill in for another teacher?
Sorry, Caitlin, you might, I don't know if you, I know you'll get to it at some point, but the verify students feature so that they know that the waiting room isn't necessarily necessary if the students have been verified.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And we'll talk about that when we get there, but I'm just going to turn my waiting room off. You do have to verify your students. Did anybody experience Zoom bombing at the beginning of the pandemic? Yeah, I see some nods. Okay, so we'll talk about that, but you can turn your waiting room off and say that students can't join before you're there. And that does the same thing as a waiting room, basically. That's my preferred setting anyway. If I wanted to make someone else, if I wanted to make Becca a co-host in my class, I can put her email here. And when she logs into my class, she's going to come in as an instructor as well at classedu.com. Okay, and then when I'm done, I click schedule. So now that course, it's not running live right now. It shows on my class schedule though. And so let's see here. Now yours isn't going to look crazy like this. Mine is crazy because I work here. So let's find my Fort Smith class. So here's my list of classes and here's my Fort Smith class in my class schedule. So I'm going to click on that and then I can see my schedule. If I wanted to edit this for any reason, I could click this pencil icon to edit it. And I come back to that same screen. Okay. If I delete this course, you can delete this course, but just a heads up, if you've built anything in here, it deletes everything. It deletes the class roster, it deletes all the materials you've put in. So be cautious with this delete button. I'm going to show you what this looks like when I join this class, just so that you know what it looks like when you enter your class. So click that blue join button and okay, here we go. Does anybody here go into their classroom? Like when you taught in a physical classroom, did you go in and did you set up your cork board and some decorations and set things up the way you wanted it for the semester? Yeah, this is the equivalent of that. I'm in here, I'm in my classroom, but there's no students in here. So I get to, you see me up here on the podium. Hi, everybody. But I don't have any students in my gallery. Has anybody seen this before? Have you seen this view with the teacher up on the podium before? Okay. And Leah, and some of those of you who haven't seen this before, we're going to go to a version with some video feed students, and you'll see what that looks like so that you'll get it to experience what it feels like to be in an actual classroom. But what I wanted to show you was, remember how we talked about if you were going to post your Zoom link in your course page, right? So do you see this little info button up here above my podium? Right in the corner. Okay, let's click that little info button. And what that does is this brings up all of my meeting information. So instead of a Zoom link, you now have a class link. So this is the class link for your course. So that info button, you can grab the link for your class. It's got your schedule, it's got everything all set up. And let's look at what happens when I click this link. I'm going to open this URL and oops, give me 1 second. Here is what that looks like. Sorry, I'm moving this over. So here is what, when I click that link, this is the website that opens up. So students can just click to launch the class, and they're on Chromebooks, is that right? Samantha, are you pushing this to students so that they'll have this on their Chromebook already? Yeah, so they'll just click to launch the class, and it'll open the app and it'll enroll them, it'll add them to your roster, and they'll be in your class. So it's super easy for students. Does that sound good? Cool. Perfect. Okay. Now I think I'm going to hand this over to Becca, right, Becca? Is that what we're doing now?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, great. Let me stop sharing. I got to find my Zoom controls and I'll let you take over.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So I'm going to open up a version of class, which is a demo environment. And the reason I'm going to do that is like what you just saw with Caitlin's class, there was nobody in there, right? So it's hard to see what all the tools and features of class can provide without actual students in there. So when you open up your application, you are also going to have this launch demo class button in the corner. And we highly recommend this is where you go just to learn some of the features, to play around with things. When you launch this, you have the option to join as a teacher, a student, or an unverified user. Again, we recommend you try all three just to see what the different perspectives are. We're going to join as a teacher right now. And if I choose these advanced options, I can add a couple of things. Does anybody anticipate using like a document camera or having some other camera to show what you're going to be doing in class? Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Cool. What's the average size of your classes? Maybe we'll say like 20, 25. Is that wishful thinking? I don't know.
Probably somewhere around there.
Okay, great. I used to teach 35 kids at a time in high school math. So
And,
I love
and it
20
may end
students.
up there. I mean, it may end up more. We'll
yeah.
see. Hopefully.
All right. Well, you can always play around with it and change it. But we are going to enter class now. Okay. So welcome to class. Before we jump into things, what are some things that you notice that are different than regular Zoom? What are the first things you notice? You can either come off mute or tell us in the chat. Yep, I see Melissa notices the teachers on the left. Anything else we notice? So there's a lot, it's a little bit more formal. Yeah, there's the roster under the teacher, easy to follow. Yep, there's this instructor camera. Yeah, so you're gonna notice there are so many things that you can do in class, and we know it's a lot. This session is really meant to be an overview to really give you some insight as to what's capable within class. And then you can go in and try some things on your own, and then we're here to support you guys. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this instructor, Miss Ann Malley. I'm going to move her to the podium so that it looks like a real classroom. And I'm going to move this instructor cam from underneath the instructor. So here we've got our instructor. And right below her is what we call the participant panel. So this is where we're going to start. Some of you guys noticed it's a lot easier to follow. And one of the things that makes it that way is this participant panel, right? I can very easily see my students' names. I can see who's giving me some feedback. And what else is really nice is I can see who's absent, right? It was really hard to take attendance in Zoom, right? I had to sort through the different tiles. I had to write my own list. This makes it very easy. All I have to do is look at my participant panel because these folks are on my roster and they're not in class that day. So continuing with the participant panel, you're going to notice these 4 columns across the top. The first one is going to show me my unverified students. And this is what Samantha was talking about. This is why we don't necessarily need the waiting room, because the first time students join a class, we're going to have to verify them. So if I look at my participant panel, I can see I have 2 students, Lilia and Joe, that are unverified. I also have a seating chart where I can look to see very easily who are my unverified students. Now they're brought to the front of the room. So what Lilia and Joe see is they can only see their screens, their videos. Other students can't see them and they can't hear them. So if I recognize this is not the right person, they should not be in my class, I can remove them, or they are the right person and I can verify them. And I'm going to do that for both of them.
I'll add
So
that
now-
you'll only have to do that the first time, once at the beginning of the semester, and after that, they'll come in verified.
Right. The other thing I want to point out really quickly is, do you guys see my 2 students who were unverified, Lilia and Joe? They have this blue icon right next to their name. What that icon means is that they're actually not participating via the class app. They're using regular Zoom. And this is just helpful to know because maybe they're traveling and so they don't have their regular school laptop. Maybe they're on their phones. It's nice to know if a student is using regular Zoom, just because from a teacher's perspective, I then know that their experience is a little bit different. The next column I'll show you is this focus tracking. Now, what this does is, let's see if there's anybody in here with that indicator. I'll turn mine on. So do you notice how in this column, these eyeballs just showed up? Does anyone know what these mean? Has anyone watched any of our videos? So we call these the googly eyes. And this shows up if class is not the main application that a student is using. So I just clicked out of class, which is why these eyeballs showed up. They're here and they're also in this corner right here. So these are only visible to the teacher. They're not actually tracking eye movement. They're just one of the many tools that help teachers kind of get a pulse on where students are at. We know that sometimes they might be doing something else. Maybe they are taking notes in another app. Maybe they're responding to a text. Maybe they're playing games on a web browser. But this is just one tool to help us kind of get a pulse on where our students are. The next column is our feedback column. So you'll see, and if you've been watching this, you'll notice that some of these little icons have been showing up and then they're going away. So This is feedback just like in regular Zoom, where students can give a reaction and it shows up on their tile. It also shows up here. So this is really nice. Maybe I asked a question. I said, who's ready to move on? And I wanted to see very quickly who felt good about it. I can see a Tia. Tia might need a little bit more support. So maybe I send her a message. There is both public and private feedback that students can give. And that lives right here under reactions, just like in regular Zoom. So the public feedback is up here at the top. Everybody can see this. And here's private feedback that students can only share, only the instructor sees it. So maybe a student wants to tell you, I need you to slow down a little bit, or I need to take a break, but they don't want everybody to know that. And so this is private feedback that only you can see, both in their tile and in the participant panel. I can also, if I'm noticing I'm getting a lot of feedback, I can organize my seating chart by it. So here I have all the students with feedback brought to the front of the room. And the same goes with hand raised. I love being able to see all my students with their hands raised in the participant panel. It's such a great just overview of who has a question or who's ready to go. And again, here is another seating chart that actually brings the student who's had their hand raised the longest to the very front. So this tells me that Jordan has had her hand up the longest. If I'm organizing them like this, this is my view. And so I can call on her. If I call on her, she's removed from the front, but she's going to get a little blurb that pops up that says, your teacher would like you to unmute. So then she can ask her question. I can also just lower a student's hand. Has anybody been in a Zoom meeting where they raise their hand to ask a question and then they just leave it up the whole time because we forget? So if that's happening, I can just lower Tia's hand. She already asked her question, and then I can move on to Jimmy. So these are some of the tools that we see within the participant panel. Does anybody have any questions around this feature so far?
I do.
Mhm.
Is there a way to disable all those little hand movements? I teach kindergarten, so the kids just sit there and just play with them.
Sure. I don't think so at this point. Caitlin, do you know about this?
There's not a way to disable them, but I will put that in the wish list. And my recommendation would be, Karen, just ignore them.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
I also,
did.
yeah.
and then click lower their hand so they'll,
Right.
move
I
off.
will also say, especially for our littler kids, you can award them stars. So maybe you want to support them and not just playing around with the feedback. And you can say, Suzanne, I appreciate you're only giving feedback when it's necessary. So I'm going to give you a star. Now Suzanne has a star. Good question though. We will definitely put that on the wish list. I want to show you a couple of other seating charts. So if you click on general, this is just going to bring my instructors and my presenting group to the front of the room. I'm really excited about this participation view. Has anybody taught over Zoom? And you it's really difficult to kind of remember who is participating, or you just remember that there are 2 kids but it's hard to get a pulse on where everybody else is. So participation view gives us kind of a visual metric on how often students are coming off mute and participating. So you're going to see everybody here has this red bar right here. And that's because these are all video feeds. So nobody is coming off of mute. They're just video recordings. But if this was an active class, any student who hadn't participated at all would have this red bar right here. If they had come off mute a couple of times, they're participating a little bit, the bar would be raised halfway and it would be yellow. And if they're really actively participating, it would be full and it would be green. Now, students don't have this view. This is only for the instructor. And it also only tracks how often they're talking. I'm going to show you in a little bit where you can also see some data around other ways students are engaging, like feedback, raising their hand, and using the chat. Now, the front of the room, I'm going to turn it off for a second. And you can see this just brings everybody, makes everybody a little bit bigger. I can see all my kids. I can bring my instructor camera to the front of the room. Let's say I'm using a document camera, I can have it here, or I can move it underneath the podium. Oops. Now I can put Anne back at the podium. And I can also have a presenting group. So does anybody like to do group work? Maybe send your students out to do some research and then have them present. So I can bring my presenting group to the front of the room. I forgot Molly's also in this group, so I'm going to make her a presenter. And then they tell me Kurt's actually not in their group, so I can remove him. You can also move students to the podium, but this is just a really nice way to kind of separate any group that might be presenting, bring them to the front of the class. I'm going to turn this off. Okay. A couple of views I want to show you. We're looking at the gallery view, just like in Zoom, but I can also have a speaker view. If maybe you had a guest speaker, you wanted to highlight the person who's doing the speaking, and they would show up here. I just have my camera off in class. And now I want to talk about privacy mode. Did anybody have the experience when teaching virtually of teaching to a room full of black screens where students didn't want to turn their cameras on? Yeah, and that can be really challenging as a teacher and as a student, right? We need to see their facial expressions, their feedback, their body language. Privacy mode was developed because of this. So if I turn privacy mode on, you'll notice nothing looks different. But what actually is happening on the student side is their camera is on, but only the teacher can see it. So let's say you wanted to give your students a Zoom break, right? They don't have to be on in front of all their classmates. If you turn on privacy mode, only you as the teacher can see their camera. Anyone see when they might use that? A little bit, yeah. So the other view I want to talk about is Proctor View, and I only bring this up, it is coming soon. But Proctor View, what it will look like is you will be able to see a student's camera. You would see a student's feed, and right next to them would actually be a screen share of what's going on their monitor. You could use this to proctor exams. But we also like to think of it as kind of a teacher's way of being able to walk around the classroom, right? I can see my student, and then right next to them, I would be able to see what's happening on their computer screen. And that is coming likely end of September with that release. Okay, and I will just highlight here that you can change the number of videos per screen. So until we have Proctor View, if maybe you send kids out to do an independent assignment and you want to actually be able to see them a little bit more clearly and then walk around the classroom that way, you can give yourself fewer videos to look at. Questions so far? I know this is a lot. We're well aware. Great. Okay. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the chat, which we have designed to look more like a cell phone. Chatting with students in Zoom can be really challenging because the chat, it's not organized, right? Everything goes to everybody. It's all in the same feed. And so our chat looks more like a cell phone where I have messages that I'm sending to everybody. And then I can also send direct messages to students. Maybe Francisco is out of town and I want to welcome him back. And then you'll see I now have a message with Francisco. When I get a new message, I'll have a little icon, a little marking that shows up here. And I also really want to point out that you can choose who your students are chatting with as the administrator. If you click on these 3 dots, maybe you're giving an exam and you want your students only to be able to chat with you as the instructor, or maybe you're doing some collaborative group work and you really do want them chatting with each other, right? So this is where you can control some of those settings. I'm going to go into these teaching tools. These are the tools that I like to think of. These are the ones that you're actually using during class. So does anybody use a syllabus? Maybe like first or second day of school, you kind of go over your syllabus with your students. Or maybe an agenda, maybe kind of you like to have a daily agenda posted. The reason I'm going to point this out, well, I want to point out a couple of things. Notice when I launched it, it opened up in a tab up here. So students now have their syllabus, but they also can go back and see their classmates, and they're still seeing you as the instructor. There was also a website that I had launched earlier. What I'm pointing out here is that when you launch content to your students, they are never sent outside of the virtual classroom. So if you're giving them an assignment from your LMS or you're sending them a video, anything, it will open up within class, and they're no longer switching back and forth between Zoom and whatever you want them to be working on. So when I launched my syllabus, this tab opened up, and now this opened up on students' computers, and they can actually scroll through the document on their own. So if I wanted students to see what I was seeing, I would likely share my screen, because that means they would be going at my pace. If I wanted them to go at their own pace, I would launch something from one of these teaching tools, and I'll show you kind of the different tools and how you can use them. I'll also point out that I have these X's on my tabs up here. Students do not. So if I launch the syllabus, we looked through it together, we answered questions, and then we were moving on. If I close it, it closes for my students as well. So you're also going to see the options to create assignments and assessments. You guys are using Schoology, right? You're using that for a grade book. Oh, you're using the
Connexus
right,
with
okay.
Pearson, yep.
Right, so that's where your assignments will live. So we recommend actually just sticking with your LMS rather than building assignments and assessments in class. And the reason for that is you've already created them. Even if you're using a Google Doc or anything where your students are doing an assignment, you've already created them. It doesn't make sense to create them in here. We don't want you guys doing double the work just because this has the capabilities of it. But I do really want to point out polling, because folks have been pretty excited about that. Did anybody make polls in Zoom? Some feedback we heard is that you had to do it ahead of time. With class, you can create a poll in the moment. Maybe you're planned to move on to a new concept, but you're kind of recognizing your students might not be ready. You can create a poll in the moment. The reason why it's not working in my version is because it's the demo environment. Our developers are really focused on the production build that you guys are using. So it will work when you launch your class. It's just not working in the demo right now. But play around with it. The next thing I'll point out is your learning management system. So again, when I launched it, it opened up here at the top. You can add your school's LMS. Does anybody know what off the top of their head what that website is?
It's FSVOK -9 .LMS .PearsonConnexus.com.
Connexus, is that CON?
NEXUS.
Awesome.
And Becca, that FSVOK, it's a dash, not a
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes,
thanks.
that's fine.
slash. Yep.
Okay, so this opens up to your students. They can log in and then they will actually be accessing your LMS within class. So they don't need to have it in another tab. They don't need to have it in Chrome or anything. They're working on it in here. And so that's why we recommend not creating your assignments or assessments in class, because you've already done that, right? You'll also notice that while this is part of a web browser, there's not a browsing bar up at the top, and that was intentional. That's because when we launch our LMS, when we want our students working on something within the LMS, we want them to stay there, right? So this is different than browse the web. Are there any ed tech tools that you guys are particularly fond of using, like Nearpod or Jamboard? This is where you would be able to launch some of those. Flipgrid, yeah. So there are so many tools. Yeah, Nearpod, Kahoot, I'm seeing these all in the chat. There are so many tools that you're already using. Don't recreate the wheel, right? Add them as a new web page in class. Maybe you put your Nearpod in here or your Jamboard. I'm gonna launch something that we've already had. I've already prepped this before. I launch it, it opens up as a new tab here. And you'll notice that this actually does have the web browser, whereas the LMS does not. So here, students can work on an assignment. I love Khan Academy, I'm a big fan of it. Students would be able to work at their own pace. So they would not be scrolling as I'm scrolling. They are working on this as they need to. What else is really nice is maybe I'm having students do research, or maybe I'm looking at something and I found a website. I really want to show it to them, but it's not the original one that I launched. I can just hit share with class and this will open up on all of their screens. I can also bookmark something directly from here, and then it will open up so that I can save. I'm seeing, can you show how to add those additional tools again? Is that like the tools like the Nearpod and Kahoot, those ed tech tools? Yeah, so you could do that via browse the web. And we also, so when you click on browse the web, this is where you can add that new web page. We also have a number of guides that kind of highlight how to use some of those other tools in a training library, and we will make sure that you guys get those right as we wrap up.
I'm putting
here.
it in the chat right now.
Thanks. Okay, other questions so far? I'm going to close out of some of these tabs
I have
so
a
that my
question.
students, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
So in the LMS in particular, when you have that pulled up, students can be working on their individual element, like their individual page, and I can be instructing also.
Yeah, so this is just like having your students have, maybe it's just like having them have Zoom open and their LMS in another window. But instead of them being elsewhere, they're all in here, so that they're not having to navigate back and forth, and you don't have to say, okay, go to Schoology and then click on this class and then click on this, right? It's all happening within the same place.
So how do they see me like going over, like say I want to go over, units, but how do they see me
Yeah.
at the same time?
Good question. Thank you for asking that. So pretty much all of these tools that we launch here, this is student paced. What you're talking about, Rebecca, is more like if you wanted them to follow along because you're explaining something. There, I would share my screen just like we do in regular Zoom. It's not allowing me to right here because I'm already sharing my screen in Zoom, but I'm really glad you brought that up. Sharing your screen just like Zoom is going to be follow along with me. These tools are going to be launch this, explore it on your own. Yeah, good question. I'm going to keep going a little bit. Play a video. Does anyone like to share videos with their students? Yeah, that can be really hard to do on Zoom, particularly because of audio. So with play video, Just like with Browse the Web, I can prepare something before class or I can add it in the moment. When I launch something, it's going to ask me who should have control over video playback. If I wanted students to maybe watch it at their own pace and then answer some questions, I could have them control the playback. But maybe I wanted us to watch it as a class and I wanted to pause it halfway so that we can have a discussion about it. When I choose for the teacher to have the playback, students will not have this red play button. So I control the playback, I control when we pause it, and that way we can discuss it if we need to. I will point out that if you have students who are not muted and you play the video, it's going to be extremely echoey. And so that is one of the reasons why if you go in the participant panel, you can mute all. So if I were to play this video, I would mute my students first, and then we would play it together.
Hey, Becca, it looks like Angela Risch has a question.
Yeah, Angela.
My question was similar to Rebecca's. I was wondering about Nearpod because each of the students enters as an individual student in order to give the teacher feedback about things that are completed. So they would enter the code and then work. We do a lot of them together is what I'm saying. So I'm trying to decide if it would be better to do it together as a class and have them open a separate tab, or I'm
Yes.
trying to make the connection
You
and
can-
I'm not making it clear.
I have a whole guide on Nearpod, and
Oh,
I
okay.
have a video too that walks
Awesome.
through both the instructor and the student side. But if you want, I can grab a link for Nearpod here. And while Becca's moving through, I can show you what that looks like, if that's useful. Do you want to do that
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, great.
Whenever at the end of your presentation or whatever is fine.
Okay,
I just use a lot of Nearpod almost
Yeah.
daily.
great.
Yeah, and we know that the teacher view versus the student view is different. So I think that would be really helpful, Caitlin.
Okay, I'm going to grab screen share real quick.
Okay.
And I'm going to share my screen right here. And I'm going to bring over my Nearpod. I'm going to copy my link. Okay, so I started my Nearpod. I'm copying my link. Is that familiar? Okay, I'm going to move this over to my other monitor. Let's go to my home screen. And I'm going to launch my demo class. And I'll show you what the difference looks like. You can follow along as an instructor, even if you want, with Nearpod. I'm going to remove this. And then under teaching tools, I'm going to go to Browse the Web, and I'm going to add a new page. And this is my Mars Rover Nearpod. And here's my URL. I'll click submit, and then I'll launch my Nearpod. Okay, so on my other screen, which I have up on my other monitor, okay? Here, this is what students see, right? They're gonna put in their name, and that's gonna be me for this session. I'll just join as a student. But on this screen, I can close this window, and I'll show you, as I advance these slides, they change for students. This is seamless. I love this so much. I also love this because it's a really great way to engage with students, and you get all kinds of different polls, right? So here's my instructor view of what the poll looks like on the back end. Here's my question for students. By this point, I've done this Nearpod a lot. I know a lot about the Mars rover. So I now on this end, I can see that my answers have come in, and I can click share the results, and it shares the results right to that same screen. So you don't have to manage like students going to another place or opening another app in a web browser. They stay here in class. You're just serving them the thing. This is absolutely my favorite tool that works in class. So I'm going to give this back to Becca, but I have a guide and a video because I love Nearpod so much. I'm so glad you use it. that if there's anything else I can provide you with, Angela or Fort Smith team, let us know. If you want a guide on something else that we can get access to as people without accounts to things like Connexus, I can't get an account to that because I don't work at a K-12 school, but if there's a publicly available tool and you want a guide on it, let us know, we'll create a guide.
But one more thing, we would need to have a second monitor so that we could see the teacher's side, right? We're not seeing that in your platform as well.
You could continue to run your session and just, sort of alt tab back and forth between class and your other monitor. I mean, your other browser window. So if you only had one, you could just select alt tab to tab between the class app and your web browser.
I think most of us have two if we're at work, but if we ever have to work from home,
Right.
at least I only have one. So it was a struggle last year.
All right, we ready to keep going? We do recommend that if you do have favorite tools, test them out, get in a class with each other, and just kind of see what the student view versus the teacher view looks like for that. All right, we talked about play video. With share files, this is going to launch similarly to the way the syllabus did. So share files, I can share a Google Doc with them or a PDF. This is something maybe I want to give my students an article to read before we start the lesson. If I launch it to them, again, it's not share screen. So that means that they can read it at their own pace. What I am seeing as I scroll down isn't necessarily the same pace that they're going to. So when you share a file with them, again, it opens at the top and they can read through at their own pace. I will highlight that whiteboard annotation tools will be available end of August. Our whiteboard, if you click on it, it just says it's coming soon. That's because our developing team really wanted to make it better than what Zoom has. And so they're developing a lot of different tools within it. But we know how important annotation is for some folks who enjoyed using that. So that's coming before the entire whiteboard is finished. But that's why we love things like Jamboard and online whiteboards. Okay, any questions around the teaching tools? Again, this is something I really recommend just playing around with. You can launch things and prepare them before class or in the moment, and they all open across the top here. Okay, our last area I'm going to focus is classroom management. So if teaching tools are the things you're using in class and prepping before class, I think of classroom management as the information that you might want to access after class. So we saw a little bit about our class roster. Here it says I only have 3 students. Again, it's just because we have video feeds here. If your student comes in via their LMS or from a link that you sent them, their email address will be populated here. But let's say I wanted to change the email address, or maybe instead of Becca, I wanted to go by Rebecca. If I submit that, that then changes my name here, and I don't have to change that again. You'll notice these 2 students, they don't have an email address here. That's because they came in from Zoom. If you remember, these are my 2 students that were unverified at the start of class, but I can add their email address, or I could remove them here. But I will say, check in with your Zoom settings about removing students, because if there is a chance that if you remove them, they can't come back depending on what your settings are. So just be careful about that. I can also add students to my roster here just by typing in their email address and their first and last name. This will send them an email with the link. Maybe you wanted to add parents to your roster or something like that. You could do that here. With attendance, so we saw how you could very easily see who's not here. That was over in the participant panel. that showed me my absent students. But with this attendance view, this is going to give me an overview. So I'm looking at today, but if I clicked here and we had previous days of class, I could see some historical data as well. So this will tell me who is absent and who is present. Tardiness means a student joined 5 minutes late or more. This is also really nice for knowing when students came in and when they left. Has anybody ever launched breakout rooms and when you have everybody come back, you've lost like 10 students? That happened to me a lot because I taught high school. So this is really nice because I can actually see what time they signed out. And so maybe I noticed that Kurt has been leaving and coming back and I want to call home about it. Now I have some data to support that. And I can look at the student report, his individual data, and I can then see this entire semester, he's been doing that every single day. And that's worth talking about. Gradebook, similar to assignments and assessments, we recommend just using the one you already have. There's no point in having 2 gradebooks if you've already taken the time to set yours up. So if you're using assignments in your LMS, again, don't recreate the wheel, use the gradebook that you have, especially because if you're having students do work in your LMS, it's not going to connect to the gradebook in class. So use the tools you're already using there. This dashboard is something I'm really excited about. Remember before I showed you that participation view where I could see how often students were talking? But we know that we have students who like to participate in different ways. Maybe it's the start of the year, not everybody feels comfortable coming off of mute. This is where I can see more data around how other ways students are participating. So when I clicked on the dashboard, this first page is going to give me some broad class data. I can see how long my class ran for, teacher talk time, student talk time. And then we go into the weeds a little bit more. This tells me students spoke 10 times for an average of about 31 seconds. This is a really nice overview because maybe you are recognizing, oh, I talked for a half hour. I want to cut that down and I want to boost student talk time. You can set your own goals here, right? This also gives me some data around student feedback, as well as chats that students are having. So these numbers, it's just data for you. A high number of chat versus a low number of chats is not good or bad. It's just feedback for you. If we click on view student detail, now I can see participation by student. So just like with the attendance view, I can see that here as well, attendance, tardiness, time in, and time out. But if I keep going, now I've got a whole lot of data around other ways students are participating. So this participation, both for the class session and the semester, shows me some data around how often or how long students were talking for. And you can see that it's kind of color coded with this red, yellow, and green to kind of quickly draw my eye to the students I might want to focus on a little bit more. This focus tracking refers back to those googly eyes, the ones that kind of show when your students are on another tab or in another application. So again, this red, yellow, green, this is going to show me how long students have been focused for, how long they have actually been in the class application for. And then if I keep going across the top, we've got all that different feedback and hand raise, how often they're doing that, both with class and semester. I showed you those stars. If you wanted to make sure that you're rewarding students equitably, this is where I could see, oh, I'm giving Timothy a lot of stars. Maybe I should make sure that I'm giving them to other students as well. And then there is data around the number of chats students are having, both with each other and with the teacher. So there's a lot of data here. It's pretty intuitive to use this dashboard. And again, this is really just for you to be able to get some feedback. Maybe you use this a lot during parent-teacher conferences or to help students set their own participation goals. Lastly, it says breakout rooms here. Breakout rooms is actually now going to live at the bottom here like it does in Zoom. And right now, class breakout rooms operate just like they do in regular Zoom. But we have a lot of features that are coming, which actually, Caitlin, do you have that screenshot? Hold up, I forgot to do that.
I do. I have it. Do you want me to
Okay.
share?
Yeah,
I
so
got you,
Caitlin's
girl.
going to show you what breakout rooms are going to look like with this next release, which is end of August.
I am super excited about, oops, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to present, not share. I'm really excited about the changes that are coming to breakout rooms because right now they work very much like breakout rooms do in Zoom. You have the pop-up and if you're not in the breakout room, you kind of have no idea what's going on in there, right? Do you all in your classroom though, you sort of walk around the room and you listen in and you get a view, like you can see what people are doing without actually coming in and sitting down at the table. We built that for you. I'm really excited about this. So like Becca said, the breakout button is down here at the bottom so you can always see it. You don't have to move to the class management tab. Students can choose rooms on their own. If you allow them, you can assign automatically or manually. And then I want to point out here that instructors and TAs, you have access to send different tabbed content to different breakout rooms. So if you had group A wanted to do a book report or a slide deck on a book that they read, and group 2 read a different book and they're going to do a collaborative slide deck, you could send different slide decks to different rooms. Those students can create those Google Slides and then bring them back and share, do a jigsaw, right? Like they can talk about what they created with their classmates. Does that sound useful? Yeah, I see Jennifer, like Jennifer's excited about this. You can name and save these breakout rooms. Does anybody here have students that work together on topics frequently, like that you relaunch those breakout groups time and time again? If you wanted to, you could do that. Here's the other thing. You get to hover over. Do you see this? You can see who's in the main classroom if somebody came in while you were in breakout rooms, and I can see what's going on in my different breakout rooms all at one time. I can sort of have this as the instructor. I can have this overview of what's happening. I can also see which breakout room I'm in or if I'm still in the main classroom. And this is the other thing I want to point out. Do you see over here, I've got 5 people in the main classroom. I can see who's talking. Do you see this little head with the little talking mouth? I'm so excited about this because sometimes we send students to breakout rooms and we assume they're doing work and they're all on mute and they're doing nothing. Sarah's like, yup, Sarah's seen that. Middle schoolers, am I right? So I can see who's talking. I can look at their chat. I can see kind of what, I can get a picture of what's happening in those breakout rooms. Here again, that's you can see who's speaking, and I can monitor all the chats in all the breakout rooms from my instructor panel. So who's excited about this? Yeah, I am, like, to me, this is the Zoom killer. This is the thing that I am so excited about because we saw the need and we built the thing. I just can't wait for this to be released at the end of this month. Every time I see it, I get goosebumps. I just think this is incredible. I think it allows for the kind of collaborative work that we do intuitively in a classroom that's really hard to do in Zoom.
It's the Zoom killer. I've never heard that before, but I love it.
Not really the Zoom killer because we still have to use Zoom on the back end, but for teaching,
I know
this
what
is
you
just
mean.
such an improvement. It's just such
Yeah.
a big improvement for teaching. To me, I think that that's the thing that's a game changer for education. We do small groups all the time intuitively in teaching, and it's hard to do in Zoom. Thanks, Becca.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I did see a question. Can you award a star to the entire class all at once? I don't think you can, and I would love to add that to the wish list because how awesome for like collective
Yeah.
goals as a class. I love that.
I'm adding that to the list.
Yeah. So any other questions in the instructor view of class before we do have some time, so I will show you the student perspective. Is anyone excited to just kind of get in there and start playing around? Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Okay, so again, from our home dashboard, if I launch the class, I'm going to join as a student now, just to show you what they're going to see. So you'll notice a lot of it looks really similar, right? I can see some of the feedback that my classmates are giving. I have this tab at the top that I can go back and forth between because this is what we're working on right now. But what's different is that they don't have that classroom management stuff, right? They don't have access to all that data about all the kids in their class, which makes sense. But they do have these student tools, and it's not all of them because you are in charge of what you're launching to them, right? But these are things that they can see at any time. So they can always access the syllabus. Maybe they wanted, or maybe you use this as a classroom agenda for the day instead of your syllabus. If there's something that you wanted them to have access to every day, maybe it's classroom norms or rules, you can make that your syllabus and then they can always be looking at it. If you share any files with them that you want them to be looking at, they'll always have access to those here as well. So these are here because if you recall from the instructor's view, these are the files I shared with them. But don't forget, you can also launch them to your students, so you don't have to tell them that they have to go to files to open them. Grades will connect to the class grade book, so it probably won't be very relevant to your students, but this is where they can access their LMS. So again, you can launch this to your students and they can't exit out of it. So if you wanted to launch an assignment, it would show up here. But if for whatever reason they wanted to access their LMS, they can. But it's not opening up as a web browser, so it's not going to take them to play Minecraft or Animal Crossing or anything. They're not going to be browsing the web here. It's just going to go to their LMS. And then here are the current activities that are open. So they can either kind of go through the tabs at the top of the screen, or they can choose things down here. Any questions about student view? I will show that they can also change the seating chart. Maybe they really want to get to know their classmates' names and want to look at them alphabetically. They can change that here. They can also change the view. Questions? It sounded like someone came off of mute. Okay. I'm going to leave the class, the demo class. Oh, good question, Sarah. If they change the seating chart, does that change on my view or just theirs? That's just going to change it on theirs. Yeah. So if everybody has access to their own views, everyone can kind of organize their class how they want to, in whatever way is most helpful to them. Yeah, good question. Okay, I'm going to leave the class and we'll come back as a group. So after this, you guys will receive a recording of this session. We're also, actually, I'll share my screen one more time. You will also see desktop 3. We are going to send you a training library. So some of those videos that Caitlin was talking about, if you scroll down here, there's a ton of guides. There's learner guides.
We're not seeing
What?
it. I'm sorry. Do you want me to share
Oh.
mine?
You're not seeing my screen?
We're just see your desktop.
Oh, weird. Let me try this one more time. Desktop 3, share. How about now?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So in this email, you'll see our training library, which has a ton of resources. So a guide for setting up your document camera, learner guides that you can use to kind of figure out how you're gonna get your students to learn how to use class. If you scroll down, just lots of tools. We've got an instructor guide on Nearpod. If there are any tools, like Caitlin said, that you really want to learn how to use within class, let us know and we'll create the guide for you. We're also going to send you a YouTube playlist with some helpful videos for you guys that we think might help with you guys. And I also want to highlight this link, which will be in the email as well. So any other questions or like just kind of a home base for class support, you can go to class.com/support. This is where you can also open a support case or email our support team. So we will make sure to get you guys that as well as this recording. How are we doing? How are we feeling?
Were we going to go over how to get that download? Because there's about half of us that still can't download it.
Yeah, that I put in the chat, but Samantha and who's the other named support contact? Samantha and Lori are your two folks, and
Okay.
they'll be able to help you on the Fort Smith side, download that onto your computer. Is that
Okay.
right, Samantha? She's nodding. She's giving me a thumbs up. So you can reach out to Samantha and Lori and Angela, and they'll give you a hand getting the download installed. And if
And we
and
may
if
have
they-
to get technology because I don't know whether it's a device issue or what's going on.
Right. And if you all need help, Samantha, that class.com/support page, you can input a ticket there. You and Lori can input tickets there. It does have to be one of you two. I'll point that out, that it has to be one of the named support contacts. So all my teachers here at Fort Smith, if you need technical support, let Samantha and Lori know and they'll funnel it up to us. Okay. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Becca, you did a great job. I just want to say, good job, Becca. Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited to be working with you all. So if you want another follow-up session in a week or two, once you start playing around, I'm going to end with my consistent advice. My advice is always, this tool feels like a lot. It is not. I would start with how you teach in Zoom, start there, and then start adding things. Be intentional about what you want your classroom to look like and how you want to engage with your students, and start building from there so that you get some confidence in that new space first. Build some confidence, maybe invite some of your other teachers to join a meeting and join in class. We have all of our internal meetings here at class. We use the class product for that. Instead of Zoom, we have our meetings in class. And practice promoting people, practice looking at the menus, use that demo environment and see what it feels like to see those teachers, those students in your class, and see what those different menus do and how to award stars, and look at that dashboard data and play around with this a little bit. Have fun. I hope that you get some feedback from this tool about how you engage authentically with your learners and how you can work towards your learning outcomes intentionally using the tools that we have available. Any other thoughts or ideas before we leave for the day? Okay, Samantha, whenever you want to schedule some more sessions, let us know and we're here for you.
Okay, great. I'll talk to everybody and I'm sure we will in another week or so. And
yeah, usually after a week or so, once you start using it, you'll have different questions. So let's do another session.
perfect. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, y'all. It was
Thank
so
you,
nice to meet
everybody.
everybody. Have a great day. Thank you. Thanks, Becca.